Welcome back. If you're watching this video, then you have completed the structure of the mug. So you've gone from your pinch pot to the coils, you created your handles, and now we're ready to attach it. So that's what this video is going to be all about. There's going to be a little bit of technical kind of things that we need to go over, so just kind of pay close attention to that and make sure you're applying it to your own mug, and you'll be really happy with your results. If you're ready, let's get started. So in order to make my rim really even, I'm going to flip my mug over and I'm going to just tap it on the table. So I'm going to kind of cradle it in my palms. That way I get the rim nice and even. But I don't want to leave it at this 90-degree angle. So I'm going to go back in and I'm just going to kind of pinch this a little bit to even it out. And then I'm going to smooth it and get rid of that sharp edge, because you don't want to leave this sharp edge, because then you'll get a drip when you go to drink out of this. So I'm just using this part of my finger to kind of smooth that out. And you know, I'm always supporting it. I'm just supporting it like this, but if you need to kind of put your hand along that edge so you're not pushing the clay wall out. I'm just rounding that edge. So be careful when you do that, and you can use your thumb as well. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the outside. So I'm just using pressure from my fingertip, the pillow tops of my fingertips. And if you have an area that's a little bit too thick, just go back to your pinching and thin that out a little bit and then smooth it. And you are doing a hand-built pottery form. So it's okay if it looks like it's been hand-built, you know. I mean, some artists, they really strive to make it look like it was from a mold or it was made from the pottery wheel, and that's fine. That's a really specific, type of work, and I respect it, definitely. But as a beginner, don't feel like it has to look like that. So once you have your rim even and you've smoothed out those edges with your fingertip, then you can go back in with your sponge and smooth it with your sponge. But don't get your sponge really wet or your clay really wet, because that'll mess with the body of the pot. So there we go. Now our pinch pot mug coil section is nice and smooth, and our clay is stiff enough that we can add our handle. So we need to talk about a few things in regards to handle and spacing. And the first thing we want to talk about is adding stuff to your handle. So yes, you can add artistic work to your handle, but you want to do it in a way that it's not going to affect the way the mug itself works. So this flower, where it's positioned, it's going to get in the way of where your hand goes when you're holding it. But also when you store your mugs, if you store them in your cupboard upside down, like this mug is always going to fall over because of this flower. So we want to make sure that we've got, if we do add attachments, which I'm not going to teach you guys how to do that, but if you were, you wouldn't want to put it up here on the top above the rim, okay? The other thing I want you to notice about this mug is how it's attached. So there's not enough room for your hand to get in here. So it's going to be impossible to drink out of this mug because you would have to hold it like this. And you're not going to be able to drink like that. So avoid, doing anything like really artsy like this, because if you want to be able to use your mug and have it functional, this isn't going to work properly. Another thing that you want to pay attention to is the spacing between the body of the mug and the handle. So this one is too far apart, and same with this one. So yes, it works. I can get my hand in there, but it's unbalanced. So I have to really work at holding this because of how far out this handle is. So the weight of my mug is always being pulled down. So if this handle was closer, you wouldn't have that issue. So here's an example of a handle that's spaced properly. So when you hold it, you don't have extra effort. So on average, the handle spacing is about an inch, inch and a half. Sorry, I have my ruler backwards. Yeah, so an inch, inch and a half, and that's about average on any mug that is going to function properly. So these handles are a little bit different. One has a little bit more of an arch here on this back side, but the placement is still only a ½ inch on each one of them from the body of the pot to the handle itself. Also notice that the handle is level with the rim. So when you flip it over, it doesn't, it's not wobbly. And that's really going to be where your placement, that's how you're going to guide and know where to put the top of the handle. You can drop it down a little bit if you want to, if you've got enough height. But if your cup isn't big enough, then you might always have to put it at the rim. So you'll have to use your best judgment with that. However, if you do drop your handle down, you probably only want to do that about a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch, because if it gets too low, again, your mug's going to become unbalanced and you won't really be able to hold it very well. So those are the things that we're going to kind of make sure that we pay attention to as we're adding our handle. So what I like to tell beginners is find the worst spot on your mug. So I think I'm going to use this area right in here. I could have probably done a little bit more smoothing on this. So I'm going to use like this side right here. And then I'm going to pick out which handle I want. Now you probably only have maybe 2 or 3, maybe you only have 1, but whatever kind of handle or whatever number you have is you want to kind of put it up against the mug to see the spacing. Now we just talked about the spacing, and this is, we know, is going to be way too wide. So what you can do is you can take your handle and you can kind of put it underneath the mug to kind of see how much you need to kind of cut off. But when you do this, you're just kind of looking at it and making a guess. So what I always tell kids is, or beginners, is only cut off a little bit at a time. Now you have your popsicle stick, so you can use your popsicle stick to cut this, but when you cut this, you want to make sure that you cut the top of the handle at an angle. So if you put it on your mug and you know it's too wide, we're going to cut off just a little bit at a time. A little bit at a time, and we're going to check it, because if you let too much go, then you're going to be out of luck and you're going to have to start over. So I'm going to check my handle again. That's better. But if we hold this up against our mug and then we measure it, that's still 2 inches away. So I am going to pull this down more like this. So I know that that's what I'm going to do, so I could check it again. But it's still 2 inches, so I know that this handle is still a little bit too big. So I'm going to cut just a little bit more. And I think that's going to do it. Yep. So I'm going to set this one aside. And I have another one that I wanted to show you. So this one is really, really, really curvy, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim it. I just want you to be able to see this one last time, and then we'll get to the attachment process. So that looks nice, but the spacing is just too much, and the cup would be too heavy. So again, that's still 2 inches. Cut a little on the bottom. I'm going to cut this at a little bit more of an angle. And I bet you that is about 1.5 inches. It's a little small, so I cut too much that time. So this is 1 inch, from mug to the inside of the handle, and that would probably work. I mean, you could try it. It's kind of mockly try it, but I feel like that might be a little bit too close. because my 1.5 inches is when the handle is on the outside. So if you cut too far, I mean, you can try to attach it, but I think it will probably be uncomfortable. So that's why I kind of suggested that you have several handles to choose from. So I'm going to cut the top at an angle. And I'm going to cut the bottom as well. And generally, if you notice on my one that's already prepped, like it's almost straight. But sometimes, depending on the shape of your mug, that's not necessarily true. But hopefully you have a pretty straight up and down mug, because we didn't talk about how to alter it. Because I was more worried about, I wanted you guys just to understand the technique itself. Okay, that's good. So I've got my two, and look, they're almost exactly the same. So I'm going to set those aside, and again, this shouldn't be super wet. So you made your handle, and then you put it on your board, and you covered it for a day. So now we're back to attaching this. So I told you to pick the worst spot on your mug. So mine was going to be right in here. So now I'm just going to kind of figure out where I want to place this. And make sure you line it up so you're looking at it. And then with your popsicle stick, or some of you have a modeling tool. If you're on campus, you have a modeling tool. You're going to mark it. If you have a pencil, you can even use a pencil. But I'm just going to mark kind of the top. So the top underneath. So I'm just marking it right here on the side. And then I'm marking it underneath at the bottom. And when you do this, when we attach our handle, we want to be below the rim. So you don't want to be up here like that. So you don't want to have it way up here. At the very least, it should be level with the rim, but I'm going to drop mine down just a little bit. So now that we know where we're going to put our handle, we need to score and slip. And we're going to score and slip because remember, anytime two pieces of clay come together, you want to use the glue of the ceramic world, which is our slip, S-L-I-P. And then we're going to go ahead and score. And I don't have my fork near me, but you guys will have your fork. I'm going to go ahead and just use this felting knife. And so I'm going to score. Remember your scoring marks, you're just kind of going all over that area where you applied the slip. And then I'm going to do the same thing to my mug, so apply your scoring marks. And when I do this, I'm going to kind of line up my handles, line it up. I like to turn it so it's like this, so it's on its foot. And then I'm going to apply pressure. So I'm applying pressure right here. But I like for my mugs to have a little bit of a thumbprint right here. That's just a personal preference. But if you don't like that, then you're going to kind of hold here. And you'll press into this section. But you've got to make sure that that clay is being pressed onto the body of the mug. So I'll show you how I do it. So I'm going to push with this hand into the handle. And I'm pushing underneath here with this finger. So it's this motion of pushing it onto the clay wall. And then once I do that, I'm going to put it on its side, and I want to line this up because if you notice, it kind of fell. And put it on its side, make sure it's straight on the side, and then flip it and make sure that it's straight this way. So on this bottom part, I'm just kind of pressing that clay down, kind of smoothing it in. Now, if you wanted this to stay separate, I'll show you in a side view when I switch gears here. I'm going to cut this back off and show you another view of how I attach this. I can show you how to keep that. But if you want that smoothed in, you would just apply some pressure, use your fingertips to smooth it. And then notice the side right here. So we're going to keep pressing this because this isn't completely attached. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fingertip and I'm just going to kind of smooth this out. I'm just applying pressure. But I want to keep this separation because I like the way that the handle looks separate from the body of the mug. But if you don't, you feel free to smooth this in. You absolutely can. And then I'll go back in and I'll just kind of round this part out. And then I'll give it a test. You don't ever hold this by its handle. It's not ready for that. It'll just tear off. So you can kind of mockly do it. And then I'm going to push the sides of mine. So see what I'm talking about? I like that little thumbprint that you get. But be careful because you don't want to create this really sharp right angle. So if that happens, just go back in and smooth that out. And then I'm going to use my paintbrush. I'm going to get my paintbrush wet. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to kind of clean these edges up with my brush. So make sure you do all like the corners, all the attachment points. All the way around. And if you wanted this to look like it was separate here at this base, but you ended up smoothing it in, you can always go back in and you can kind of carve that out a little bit if you want to. But it's not something that you have to do. So just use your sponge to kind of soften those edges and to smooth in any slip that kind of oozed out. Then at this point, if you want to kind of shape it just slightly, you can, but be careful that you don't tear the handle off of the mug. And there you go. If you need to reshape it slightly because it got misshaped while you were pushing on the clay wall, just kind of reshape, do a final smooth. So I wanted to give you another viewpoint of how I'm attaching these handles, so it would maybe make a little bit more sense to you if you're still a little confused. So I'm finding I've already cut my handle, so I know this is the right shape. And remember that your handle should be not super wet, so it should be kind of at that leather hard state. So it should still be bendable, but if I were to make this completely straight, it's definitely going to break here at the top. So when you made your handles, you covered them back up underneath your plastic, and you waited a day or so, and then now you're going to go through the attachment process. So find the worst spot on your pinch pot coil mug. So I think for me, it's going to be like right around this area. And I'm going to make sure that's where I want that handle. I think that's probably good. So I'm going to mark it. You can just mark it with your fork or a pencil. Whatever you have near you. Your fingernail would even work. I'm going to cut this so it's a little bit more straight because it's a little bit crooked. And sometimes when you cut these, you have to kind of straighten this area out, so you just kind of push on it with your thumb. Okay, and make sure it's lined up nice and straight. So now we're going to slip. Slip the handle and score. So if you have your fork, you can use your fork. If you're on campus, you can use a needle tool or you can use a modeling tool. So anything that will basically give you those scrapey lines, those scoring lines. But make sure you're doing it enough that it's going to be effective. But don't get out of control. You don't need to do like a really big area. Okay. So now I'm going to line this up where I want it. And I'm going to press with this hand into my clay while I'm pushing. So I'm holding it with this finger as well, and I'm going to push that clay with this finger underneath the handle, as well as with my thumb into the body of the clay, the wall of the clay, while I'm also pushing with my pointer finger here, so it's kind of acting together. So I'm pushing with both hands. And your clay wall should be strong enough that it doesn't collapse. And if you did this right, your handle should stay by itself. And now I'm just going through and I'm just kind of pushing that clay down on either side. And notice I'm always supporting here. Making sure that's compressed really well. And then I'm going to pick my mug up because I want to make sure that my handle is straight. So sometimes, like when you're focused up here, then this handle ends up way over there and you don't want to attach it like that. That would be uncomfortable. So make sure that your handle's straight. And then I'm just going to press here. So I'm just pressing straight into the bottom of the handle, the base of the handle, with my hand on the inside, pushing that clay into the clay wall. So we're going like this motion, except the clay wall is in between your fingers. And I poked my clay when I did that. And then recheck it, because sometimes it moves when you do that. And then, once more, you're going to take your paintbrush and kind of smooth any crumbs that you might have got, or maybe sometimes that slip kind of oozes out. So just kind of smooth all that stuff out. If you ended up with any crumbs, you can do some last-minute smoothing. If you stabbed the surface like I did, you can smooth that out. And I want to make sure that this stays nice and round. So if it ended up a little bit flat on you, now's the time to fix that. So just go back in with your fingertip and just kind of smooth that out. And then finally, if you need to, like if this drops down, you can just very, very gently kind of curve, take your finger and just kind of hold here though, because you're not trying to pull this off the mug, so be careful. But if you lost a little bit of that curve, you can get it back. And there you go. Now you have a really nice looking handle on your mug. And then you're going to put your name on the bottom of your mug. And the best tool to do this with is going to be with a pencil. Now you really want your clay to be at a leather hard stage if you're carving into it. So when you carve, so I'm getting these crumbs that are sticking. So this clay is actually too wet. So I'm gonna give it a little bit of time and then you would want to carve. But because you might have to drop this off tomorrow because you waited too long, you don't really have a choice and you might have to carve your name. So you're going to do your name. So sometimes you have to kind of curve it around the pot, and that's perfectly fine. And then I need your hour. So you might be in second hour. You might be in fifth hour. Maybe you're in sixth hour. So you're going to tell me your hour, okay? Now, kids are always like, well, I'm just going to put my nickname. Well, don't put your nickname because I don't know what your nickname is. And don't put your initials because I have 200 students. And if you put your initials, I'm not going to take the time to figure out whose initials are who. What you can do, though, if you have a really super long name, you could do your first initial, last name. And you could kind of curve it around if you want. Second. And then if you want to put the date, you could. So it's 2020. So you could do it like that. But I definitely need your name. So first initial, last name will work, plus your hour. And if you want to put the year, you can do so. Once you have that finished, then you're going to set this out for one day. It's only going to set out for one day. And then if it's not time for drop off yet, then I want you to cover it back up until you deliver this mug to me. Because if you let this get all the way dried out to leather or to bone dry, you let it get all the way to the green wear stage and you attempt to bring this back, you could possibly break the handle of your mug if it falls over or something. So I want you to leave your mug, when you get your handle attached, I want you to leave it out for one day. Then you're going to put your name and then you'll cover it back up if it's not time to drop it off yet. If it is time to drop it off, then you'll just drop it off that day. If you have any questions, just let me know, send me an email, and I will answer them for you. Have a fantastic day, guys. So your mug has been setting up for a couple days while you've been making your handles. So at this point, it should be pretty sturdy. You should feel the difference. It should be moving into that leather hard stage. So I'm going to do one last final compression of the clay with my rib tool. For those of you that are at home, you're going to use your popsicle stick. But we're just going to run across the surface of our mug and make sure that we can't see anywhere where we've added those coils, and that our clay wall is really nice and smooth. So I'm just going to make sure it's really compressed. And like I said, your clay, it should be even easier to do this because your clay is set up a little bit. And then when you do the inside, if you feel like you need to do that, just make sure that you support the outside wall. So don't rib the inside unless you're going to support it, because you'll push that clay out. And your wall could crack or collapse. Okay, so since I did that, I've got some crummies that are happening at the bottom. So I'm just going to spray my sponge and I'm going to clean that up real quick. So now that I have that final cleanup, now I'm ready to attach my handles.